The views presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of the Lafayette Bible Fellowship. You are listening to the Vigilance Radio Network.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back to the show. This is the Culture Insanity Podcast, and this is episode number 15 of season 3. So welcome back. Thank you for being here. Thank you for, eagerly anticipating our show, and thank you for bearing with us as we experience a little bit of technical difficulties. So I have a few things prepared for us. Good morning, everyone. Oh, bear with us. Just bear with us one moment. Back to the show.
Wow.
Why don't you just mute it?
I don't know which button to push.
Okay.
You can actually go to the actual sound setting on it and just press the mute button.
We are but a humble podcast hosted here in Southeast Portland.
There you go.
So welcome back. This is episode 15. So, there's a lot going on in the world today, and in the country today. I have a couple things prepared for us, and so on some level we're going to be addressing that maybe from a little bit different angle than it has been, just in terms of critiquing where we're at. But to start, I want to start easy and maybe light. I don't know, depending on how you interpret it. But so, as I was saying just before we went on air, there is a Christian band, and I don't know a lot of them. I don't know this one, but there's a Christian band named Hawk Nelson. The impression I get is that they're relatively large within their world that they operate in.
I wouldn't know either.
Yeah, we don't listen to too much Christian specific music and bands and stuff, but there's a band named Hawk Nelson, and they made headlines recently because their frontman, Steingard, I think is his last name, he recently made a lengthy public announcement, I guess, or post on his Instagram, his Twitter, his whatever, about how he specifically, not the band, which is a four-member band, but he specifically has recently had well, maybe not recently, but in the last few years, it's been transpiring his crisis of faith, I guess you could call it. And recently, he officially crossed that line, and his public announcement was that he no longer believes in God. He doesn't even know what all that means, so on and so forth. Mind you, he is still in this band. He did not leave the band as far as I can tell. His bandmates support him. All these things. So he is still, as far as I can tell, currently the frontman of a Christian band who doesn't believe in God. Ready, set, go. In one word, Pastor Monty.
Wow. That's
Okay, you got it.
One word. Wow.
Yeah, I knew it. I was baiting the wow. So that's interesting. Initial thoughts on that before I ask some more pointed questions.
My one word. Can you turn up my gain a little bit?
Yeah.
My one word is apostate.
Good one.
Good word.
APOS.
We're gonna play the one-up word game.
Wow.
Good word. Initial thoughts other than your one-word response.
Well, years ago there was a commentator, a Bible commentator that
Same thing.
theologians relied on heavily.
Mm-hmm.
And then, at the end of his life or at the end of his career, Charles Barkley, at the end of his career...
Charles Barkley?
The basketball player?
No. Different Barkley.
I thought you were going to talk about Tertullian. Anyway, zing.
Oh, no. At the end of his life, after having written all these commentaries on Scripture and what have you, he revealed that he doesn't believe in God.
Charles Barkley, huh?
Well, I don't remember maybe his first name's not Charles, but Barkley's the last name. Common. So if first of all, if this guy had any integrity, which since he doesn't believe in God, probably not, he needs to get out of the band.
Yeah, this is a guy that has grown up his whole life. He's a pastor's kid, so
Oh, well, that's part of it right there.
another one of those statistics.
He's still in rebellion.
He has grown up, in the faith his whole life. Everything he's done has been, as he puts it, Christian blank. Every move he's made in terms of his career and everything is always with the surname, if you will, or not surname. What's the thing, like doctor or Mr. or Mrs.
Mm-hmm.
What is that called again? Prefix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, see, he may claim to be. He may take on the moniker Christian, but he is not a disciple of Jesus Christ, and that's the whole issue right there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so my first question for a situation like this, and unfortunate, what does this type of public statement or this loss of faith, how does it affect the message of this band's songs and its following? Do you think it taints their legacy as a band when their frontman doesn't even, and for his own admission, for several years has wrestled with it? Do you think it taints the meaning of their songs and will lose their audience, I guess? Like, is it going to be hard for people to even listen to this music anymore? Because here you have the front man, and, different bands operate differently, but it's not uncommon for the front man to be, like, the main songwriter and so on and so forth. So what do you guys think in regards to, like, their legacy and their music and their following and what this, announcement of, not believing in God will do?
Josh, you want to go for it?
Sure. Okay, so it's sort of a complex issue that actually has much larger implications, and I feel like they're just sort of at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what it is. You can't relate it to a deathbed confession. Deathbed confessions are hard, whether they're pro-Christian or anti-Christian, because what you have is somebody who's, at the end of their life, and they're looking back and they're sort of under this pressure to sort of make amends, and there's a lot of like guilt and things like that can cause that. So I don't know that I would say it's the same as that. In terms of music, I don't know that I would say that it should have I don't know that I would say that it should have an effect on the legacy.
A negative effect on the legacy?
Yeah, I think it will, but I don't think it necessarily should have a negative effect on the legacy in terms of the content of what's being there. Now, again, I don't listen to Hawk Nelson because generally I don't like Christian music. So I don't know what their content is, and personally I find most
pretty
Christian
vapid
music to be, like you said, vapid.
Pretty
so
weak.
There's not much there in my mind.
Yeah.
But there are several notable Christians, moving into sort of touching a different subject, there are several notable Christian artists who have recently or in the past have come out as LGBTQ, for instance. And so how does that affect the legacy of their music? Can it still be used in church, so on and so forth? Or when you look at somebody like Amy Grant or Sandy Patty, like sort of staples of the original Christian contemporary music scene, they both had affairs, and how did that affect their career, and how does that affect their music? So I think that
Andre Crouch, drug issues, same type of thing.
Yeah, I think that it will affect the legacy of it. Okay, so here's the thing. I think Hawk Nelson is probably not listened to. I don't know the demographic, But I'm gonna say that I'm doubtful that Hawk Nelson is listened to by what you might consider to be like fundamentally strong, educated Christians.
Yeah.
It seems to me, and again, I don't know the music very well, so I'm just telling you right off
Probably progressive Christians. or
right
something.
off the face of it, that it seems to be a little bit sort of the bubblegum pop of Christian music.
Hawk Nelson.
Yeah, in comparison to like
Nickelback.
you know, like in music, there's punk, and then there's bubblegum pop, or bubblegum punk, which is like, which is like punk.
Nickelback of Christian music.
And
It's not fair.
It isn't fair. And Nickelback is like one of the like most popular touring acts. It's really crazy. Anyway,
I don't think they're worried about Adam Kunkel's critique of them. I don't think they lose sleep
but
over that.
But in any case, so given their demographic, the thing that I'd be more concerned about is, the thing that I'm less concerned about is how it affects those who are quote unquote staunch believers or stalwart believers or whatever you want to say, because I'm just gonna go ahead and doubt that those people really listen to them.
But people who are
who-
weak in faith and
who
people
pass-
No, those people would be more inclined to listen to
Those people don't know who
the
Gator
Gator
is.
vocal band.
Well,
Yeah, I gotcha.
that's one of my questions to your point, Josh. Because in his lengthy post, excuse me, in his lengthy post, he's basically being a spokesperson for people like him, right? He's taking that role
Right.
on. And then my question is, what does the promotion and
Right.
approval of
Right.
doubting Christians? Because that's one of his points: is it's okay to be doubting and it's okay to
Right.
act on your doubt and make a decision with your doubt. In this case, in the negative, what does the promotion of and approval of doubting Christians say about just the status of things, or what will it
Right.
What effect will it have?
So that's what I'm more concerned about, because I think
Right.
that his audience is a specific audience, and it's a large audience.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
He's a hypocrite with no integrity.
I don't know if I'd go that far. I think that he's
You never go as far as I do.
no, that's definitely not true. I think that he is in a specific culture and he's swept up in it, and this culture allows for people to not be fully invested, and I don't think that he has ever really understood what that meant, especially coming out of sort of not to get into the other side of the discussion, but a privileged Christian life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't have to work for his faith. By his own admission, okay, I would never make that statement as a pastor's kid myself. I would never make that statement, assuming a reality onto him. But he admits it. He admits that he came into his Christianity more as a matter of legacy, and he's just kind of been there his whole life. His whole life was quote unquote Christian, and so he doesn't really know anything else. I worry about what type of spokesperson that he makes. I'm worried less about his ministry, because quite honestly, I don't know that you could consider it a ministry. He's just sitting in a particular genre. And that's what it is. Christian music, this is one of the reasons why I don't like Christian music, right? Because Christian music to me is less ministry and more genre. It's just, it's not an outpouring of the heart that's meant to minister to others and share the gospel and your hope, but it's more a machine that's meant to use the gospel in order to make money. And so from that standpoint, I'm not sure that there is actually a betrayal of the machine or the process, because why not, and why not continue to produce for that particular subsect of people who enjoy the incessant repetition and major chords.
How old is the guy? Do we know?
No, I mean they all look, relatively young. He says, I certainly couldn't say.
And you're going to find as you get older, Adam, that's true of everybody.
That they all look young.
Yeah. Um,
He says, I certainly couldn't say for certain that God isn't there. I would prefer it if he was. My prayer in recent
I
days
think
has been,
that-
God, if you're there, please show up. I mean it sincerely. So far, I don't feel like I've been answered, but my door remains open.
I think that Josh touches. I agree with Josh. I think that he touches on the larger issue, which is of concern, and that is particularly by his own mission. He says he's a PK, but he's never taken ownership of his relationship with Christ, and that's why I discriminated between saying he claimed to be a Christian, but actually he was not a disciple of Christ. You know, and this is, and unfortunately, this is often true of people who are PKs or MKs, missionary kids, or pastors' kids. The pastor is so busy tending to the needs of the congregation that he fails to tend to the needs of his own family. And it's not unusual to find people in this situation who later deny their faith, and that's it's a major concern. You know, when we were raising our children, you know, my wife took pains to make sure that the children understood the gospel and understood that it's not our transferring what we believe to them, but each one of our children had a conversion experience where they had to wrestle with the claims of the gospel and took it as their own. And what it sounds like to me is that this kid, he just didn't take it as his own.
Yeah, so I think the larger implication then is for the listening audience, though, is that then that becomes a herald, you know, a harbinger for that experience, and then when it's accepted by that band into it, saying, you know, Christianity is big enough for those that God's love is big enough for those who don't believe in Him, and sort of like phrasing it that way,
Right.
Then it becomes really watered down and muddy. And the difficulty for that is that there is truth to that. And I think about, you know, I think about the difference between exhaustive knowledge and true knowledge, right? And I think about like covenant relationships, like the relationship of marriage, right? Anybody who says that there's no doubt in marriage, is a person who, you know, is lying or is not experienced. Of course, there's going to be in your finiteness moments where you think to yourself, man, did I make a mistake? Or do I really want to see this out, you know, till I die? But those are moments. That's not, you know, our covenant relationship. And you know, like, think about it as like a job, and really think about it like a job. Who doesn't go to work and has a bad day? Like, people have bad days at work, you know?
Did I make a bad decision at work pursuing this career?
Right.
Because I had a bad day.
Right. And that's what it amounts to. And for then somebody to turn around and then for people to turn around and say, well, you know, God's love is bigger than that and accepts that. Okay, sure. But what happens when that happens? When a manager says, I'm not going to, I just don't want to come into work today. I'm depressed about everything, and I just don't think I should be working there. And you as an owner say, well, that's okay. I'll let you keep the keys, and, you know, you can still come in and manage if you want to, but we just don't have to define it that way. That's really weird. And in a marriage, if somebody says, I don't know if I feel like I should be in that marriage anymore, and your partner says, well, that's okay. You don't have to, you know, believe in me or anything, but, you know, just keep living at the house and going through the motions. That's weird.
Well, people do that. Like, when they say we're separated, but we're still married. Like, we're taking time.
Right. So what should happen in a situation like that is intervention, right? What should happen in a situation like that is problem solving. Taking yourself out of the situation as it is, coming together and solidifying the various aspects of what defines that covenantal relationship. And there's a larger question here about the nature of music in regard to the Christian community. And I alluded to it earlier, the difference between worship and a music genre, essentially, and what the responsibility is. And I think that, again, if it's a machine meant to make money, then why not just keep going? You know, I mean, you found your niche in a genre. You can make money that way. It, quote unquote, blesses people. So why not put it out there? Why not why not have stars who aren't Christians go out and make a bunch of money that puts out a good Christian message?
This might be to a point you're making. It's a final question I have written down. It says, do we critique other areas of art in the same way? And what I mean by that is when someone creates something, do we judge it or them based on their sincerity or belief in it? Or do we just take it for what it is? Like, are they so attached to the thing, you know?
Right.
Do we... Or is it because it's Christian blank that we look at it differently? Should we look at it differently? It sounds like your point is why not? Why not continue?
If you are not viewing it as ministry, but you view it as music in a genre, then yes, why not do that? And so I think the difficulty here is a matter of integrity as an artist. So that band, if it's going to have integrity as an artist, needs to just come out and say, look, we are at best hodgepodge, at worst an atheist band, and we are making music for Christians because you know what? Christians will buy it. We're making music for doubters, and you can spin it however you want to. Doubters exist within the umbrella of Christendom, and so we're making music for the niche crowd in the Christians or whatever.
The doubting Christians.
But that's a ridiculous claim. Doubters exist everywhere. We're people of the word. We're people of covenant. And so that has to do with action. That doesn't have to do with the fact that some people have bad days and are not necessarily always stalwart in their faith. So that's kind of ridiculous, and I would say even wrong to lift that up. But with that said, yeah, you should say that. And if you do, then you have to ask the question, is the Christian community going to be accepting of it? And quite honestly, I think they would be. And I think that right there tells you something. That's why
that goes back to your starting word, Josh. Apostasy.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that tells you something, and I think that it tells you something about them. It tells you something about, the people who accept it.
Yeah.
It tells you something about the machine that runs that. And, I don't have a lot of respect for Christian music. So, it's not, it's, there's people who didn't make Christian music, but who presented themselves as overtly Christian, like Taylor Swift, for instance.
Like, maybe this is an example. I don't listen to them exhaustively like some of the people around here do, but 21 Pilots, they're not overtly Christian, but they seem to present a lot of themes of...
Well, so 21 Pilots wrestles with their Christian heritage. And they're very clear about the fact, when they came onto the scene, they were very clear, we're not Christian, we're our music isn't Christian.
Right.
We have a Christian background, and that comes out in our music, but we even doubt that sometimes. We wrestle with that. And so Christian themes will be there because they're important things that are sacred, perhaps, but they're not.
And because they're universal.
Yeah,
right.
But they're not trying to make Christian music. They're just trying to show the human experience, which for them includes a Christian background. But you get somebody like
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift, who presents herself in the early days as innocent and through a Christian perspective, and now look at where she's at. Or you go even further and you get somebody like Katy Perry, who actually started in
Gospel
Christian music,
singer, yeah.
And then, is completely, the other side of that now.
That's, I actually thought about her in the formation of the last question, thinking this is a person who had this background and now she's completely gone away from it. And so do we critique other areas of art in the same way?
Well, so what she's done, what Hawk Nelson's done is it's opened the door. What could happen is Katy Perry never left Christian music, but instead she created a genre, a subgenre within Christian music of the doubters.
Gosh.
So, and that's how you get, and you see we're poised to that, right? Like Lady Gaga, for instance, like is very vocal about the fact that she is quote unquote a Christian. Mm-hmm. You know, so what I appreciate is you've got Kanye West. Strangely to say that, but what I appreciate,
Probably weren't going to say that a year ago.
I know.
Is that another wow moment?
What I
is what it
appreciate
is.
is you have Kanye West, who, once he becomes a Christian, he says that he wants to leave the industry altogether. And he's done with rap music, and he doesn't want to do anything like that. And in talking with his pastor, he gets the advice, like, don't give up your gift, use it. And so then he starts making music toward the Christian message, right? And
He's interesting, actually, too, because he did come out with the album, obviously.
yeah.
But relative to the rest of his career since his conversion experience, he's been pretty quiet.
Yeah.
You don't really hear about him too much. I think he's active right now because of the Black Lives Matter thing. But yeah, it's an interesting one. So like maybe he's being super like introspective and like exploring what it means for his life personally.
I'm sure that would be really difficult for him because he's very outspoken before.
Yeah.
Although he is very conservative, right?
I was gonna say he's very outspoken, but he's also very pro-Trump and so.
But I would be concerned that a subgenre is being created. You know? It could have been created by Katy Perry or Lady Gaga or people like that. I wouldn't be surprised if that's like sort of a first step into in the mainstream of Christianity, saying, look, even if you don't believe in God, you don't have to leave the industry. Let's stay within it, create a subgenre. God's love is big enough for all. You can have Christian
keep thinking
music.
of that movie, that Scorsese movie too, Silence.
Oh man,
What
that's a terrible movie.
That
was a Valentine's Day special.
Yeah,
And the thing is, once you start down that road, once you start, and I don't doubt what you're saying is true, Josh. Once you start down that road, though, and you start saying, well, we've got Christian music, and now we're going to have a genre of doubters. You are now sliding down a slippery slope where you're going to be opening up all kinds of subgenres. I like Christian music. I'm into Christian spirit music, but I'm actively sinning. So let's have a subgenre of sinners or something like that.
Well, I think that's a valid critique, and that's what I was getting at. Art imitates life, right? And what we have already is subgenres of Christianity. For instance, the gay Christian, right? We have subgenres of Christianity that are trying to make their way into the mainstream that are considered acceptable. So why not do that in the art, in the art form?
Yeah.
Which of course is going to inform life. Mm-hmm. So mark my words, a subgenre is coming, of doubters, and that's going to be, we are the doubting Christians.
Yeah. And that's okay.
And that again is one of the reasons, as I've pointed out on Truth Time with Pastor Monty, one of the things that I've pointed out, and I clearly am emphatic about it, is that I have nothing to do with the moniker Christian.
Yeah.
Because it's just become so polluted that it doesn't represent where I am in my life with Christ. I am a disciple of Christ, not a Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't personally have a problem with the term Christian because it's biblical. It was used, but yes, there is a problem with confusing descriptions for identity, and Christianity as a description.
Yeah, it's been accosted by so much.
Is a problem, right? So if you're a Christian, it needs to be at the identity level. And that's the problem, is that it's been turned into nothing more than a description. So, everything needs to be within the realm of us being image bearers of God, and thus needing to reflect God accurately. That's really what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, doubting Christians is. I do worry about that concept going into the mainstream, and I don't see why it wouldn't be the case, and it wouldn't surprise me if we're going to have more people more people who possibly had to leave Christian music, had been forced out of Christian music, decided to not go into Christian music, say, you know what, there's space enough for all of us in here.
Yeah, in his post or whatever, one of his acknowledgments was, one of his fears was he was scared to, come out with this because he felt like he would be rejected by, the people in his life, from family to friends to his band to everyone he's ever been exposed to, because his world has predominantly been with, Christian peoples. But he said, like, the overwhelming response he's gotten has been positive, like it's okay, like approval for where he's at, rather than like backlash.
Well, of course it would be, because everybody can relate to doubting.
And he said that's what he says.
And anybody who claims that they don't are not being intellectually honest. But that's not what we base our actions off of.
This is what his band says. This is the end of the article. By the way, the article's in the Google chat. I don't know if you've already posted it.
I posted it.
Okay. His band says at the end, in a joint statement, blah, 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 the other three members of his band says their mission is to inspire and encourage all people with the truth that God is for them and not against them. God is still for John, and he still matters. Why? Because the truth doesn't change just because we question it.
Yeah, even theologically, like, that statement is, it's heartwarming or whatever, and there's some truth to it, but it's not really true. People are maybe offended by what I'm about to say, so get ready. God is only...
Another reason to be offended. Crap.
God isn't for you ontologically. God is for himself.
Yeah, to glorify himself.
Mm-hmm. It's so basically...
You're created to glorify him.
That's right. Like, he's for himself. And as much as you seek to glorify him, he's for you. But if you seek to go against him, this is the same God in the Old Testament, right?
Who will harden your heart.
The same God who will rain down judgment and fire from heaven. And by the way, that Old Testament God is the New Testament God. As much as Christ came and he was there not to judge the world, that was a deferred judgment. He wasn't there to bring the sword, but when he returns, he certainly will. And the blood of those who rebel against him will be as high as the horse's bridle. That's what the scripture says. So,
Revelation.
So let's not pretend that God's love means God's judgment doesn't exist. That's a straight up dumb statement by a person who's got a death mark on him.
Well, the other thing that is here that we really haven't talked about is that, what is their record label's involvement in this?
Yeah, I wonder. I don't know which record label it is.
Me neither.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But if it is a record label with as a so-called Christian moniker, then I'm willing to. Now I'm speculating. That's fine. I understand. But I'm willing to speculate that somewhere inside of their bylaws and or the conditions of signing with them, they have a clause that talks about your allegiance to Jesus Christ. And if they're with a Christian record label or one that claims to be Christian, that's likely there.
Tooth
and if
nail,
that's there,
BEC,
then there's opens up
and Fair Trade Services.
No, it's Tooth and Nail. That's sad.
I don't know Tooth and Nail. Is that a
then that opens up a whole other discussion about about where the record label is in regard to that, if in fact we have a violation of contract, etc., etc. People don't tend to think of it within that framework, but because I come from a business background, I do.
Yeah, I have a couple comments here. Let's see. So John Parker says, will they be on Gaither's game show? What do you think?
Ooh.
No.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. So John is referencing a previous episode. Go back and check that out.
And Heidi Parker says they're turning towards It's All About You Christianity and posits that they will claim that their leader is Thomas. Which is a joke about doubting Thomas. So that's what it'll be. Maybe they'll make a genre. It'll be called, maybe they'll make a new label called Doubting Thomas Records. Something like that.
Nice.
I don't even know.
And they can put Jesus' hands and with the hole in
oh my gosh.
Or hole in the hand records.
Finger in the hole.
Nice. Okay.
I don't know about that. All right.
Oh, Lucy Brown says, it sounds like a woke Christianity. Doubt is not compatible with faith. Well, that sounds like a good transition. While we may doubt momentarily, we do not stay in that. Where is God's power and victory in our lives if we remain or support our support of a brother in doubt? Yeah, I think I agree with the point you're getting at. I mean, we should support a brother in doubt. And the way that we support a brother in doubt is with Scripture.
To bring correction, yes.
And to bring correction with Scripture, right? That's how it's called admonishment. So, and we do that. And for instance, we see Christ supporting, say, Peter, right? But he doesn't do that without admonishment. He doesn't do that without a directive approach that calls somebody back to Scripture.
It's not acceptance for where you're at,
right? And by the way, if that doubt produces sin, then our responsibility is actually to exclude. That's what the Scripture says.
If they refuse, excommunicate. I appreciate Lucy Brown's use of woke Christian.
Yes.
I like it. All right, so that was 36 minutes on Nelson. And maybe the only 36 minutes we'll ever give them on culture insanity, so we'll let them have it.
Probably true.
Okay, so I actually want to read the majority of this next article and we can springboard off of it in terms of our thoughts and stuff.
Sure.
So give me 1 second here. Okay. This is a opinion article posted on USA Today, written by Aaliyah Dastigier, I think. I don't know.
This is about Carrie Underwood?
No, this is about George Floyd.
Okay.
Okay, so, yes, I want to start this by saying we are not making light of things going on in the country right now.
Do you have this article posted anywhere?
I can share it with you real quick.
So that people can read along if they want to.
Yeah, for sure. Let me forward. I'm going to forward it to you personally.
All right.
Right now.
Let's do it.
It's on Messenger.
Okay.
Okay. So Josh is going to post it, and as you're pulling it up, I'll just start. So by saying, as I was saying, there's no intention to make light of things right now, but I do want to read this opinion article, and I want to be critical of just the culture and how people respond to things. And this isn't even specific to George Floyd. I want to start out by saying George Floyd, the things involving police brutality, that's what's going on currently. But this overarching thing has been going on for several years now. George Floyd and things and other incidents like his is just another example of it. But here's the article. I'll start reading it. It's an opinion article.
It's posted.
America is outraged. The headline of the article is George Floyd, Lea Michele, who's an actress from Glee. George Floyd, Lea Michele, and the problem with performative outrage. So here it goes. America is outraged. It's evident in the streets as protesters surge through the torched neighborhoods. It's evident in the speeches in which many black activists put words to decades of pain and frustration, and it's evident in the footage of George Floyd's death, which shows a bystander pleading, "He's a human being." And it's evident on social media. Or is it? Social media has given those moved by Floyd's death and the deaths of many other African American men, women, and children at the hands of police a space to express their fears, their anger, their horror at racial violence. It's where many white people especially make promises to do better. When expressing outrage is as easy as posting a hashtag, a meme, or an empty black square, there's a question of whether the outrage is genuine or performative. Performative outrage is fleeting and rarely has action behind it. We can gauge whether it's performative when we see down the line, months from now, years from now, has there been an ongoing conversation or ongoing willingness for other communities to continue to confront the issues that black communities face. Once again, this is where I'll say it. This is not specific to black equality or anything. This is another example of it. Anyways, I'm going to go on. For some people, outrage is a momentary eruption, but for many of people of color, it's a sustained state. Outrage, psychologists say, is used to signal an important moral code has been broken. Research shows the emotion connect people The emotion can connect people in a common purpose, fueling activism against injustice. Outrage also is an often unconscious way of signaling to others where we stand on a moral issue, regardless of whether we have any intention of working toward justice. Outrage lets us show when a moral breach offends us personally. It shows how deeply we feel the wrong, that we are aware of how important it is to keep moral codes. I like the use of moral codes, moral codes, moral codes. What does that even mean? We'll get to that. Outrage serves a variety of purposes, and some of these purposes are very closely connected to what you'd call performative empathy, said Terry Apter, a psychologist and author. Because in performative empathy, you're saying, I want to signal that I have a really good and positive feelings, and I have the right kind of feelings in this situation. What happens when the feelings you express don't match the way you live? I'm going to skip this section of the article, and it's an example of Lea Michele in Glee. From Glee, she, made a public statement in light of all the things going on, saying, Black Lives Matter and they should never be treated this way, and so on and so forth. But then she was called out by one of her former co-workers on the show, and how she was treated, how Lea Michele allegedly made this really inappropriate and vulgar comment about her to her, in front of her, or whatever. And so there's a contradiction in what Lea Michele's saying with how she acted toward this particular person of color. That's the middle of the article. I'm skip forward. In an effort to amplify the voices of protesters and raise awareness about police brutality and racism, many social media users muted themselves on Tuesday. That was the whole Blackout Tuesday thing. If you're on social media, it was everywhere, on every platform. Participants, though, faced criticism for using the hashtag Black Lives Matter and BLM when posting black squares, which activists said hid posts with critical resources and information about demonstrations. Though most users who posted were probably well-intentioned, the effort did not help amplify black voices, critics said. Instead, it buried them. It was unclear what the corporations that participated and the profit off of black artists were doing to support the cause. Jack Antonoff tweeted just before the blackout, "How much money is being donated from the labels, publishers, streaming services, and all other corners of the music industry tomorrow? I can't find this info." Outside of causing confusion, the campaign exposed contradictions. And it gives an example of the Washington Redskins making a personal tweet about, equality and this and that, and how we treat minorities, and their very name suggests an insincerity to that very topic. They're called the Washington Redskins, a reference to Native Americans, and then they got backlash for their post, so outrage there. Signs at protests around the country read, "White silence is violence." Many white Americans heeding that message are finally speaking out about racial injustice, and activists don't want to discourage that. They just want people to do more. I think there's a point for raising awareness, but if that's the only thing you do, it's lackluster. In terms of what it adds to a debate that's been going on for 400 years of slavery and oppression and racism, it doesn't do much. Post online, activists say. Use a hashtag to show support or share an illustration that moves you. Then do something else. Call politicians, set up a fundraiser, organize, so on and so forth. Talk to your kids and families. Look at yourself. Reflect on where you are, they say, and all the ways of color of your skin may have helped you get there. Privilege belongs to those who can express outrage over Floyd's death, then return to their lives until the next tragedy. People of color say for them, there is nothing safe to return to. And finally, a quote from, I don't know who this particular guy is, but working in this space and being black, we live a different reality, and it's something that we cannot turn off. It's something that we go through every day, whether it be microaggressions from white supremacists or racism or race-based discrimination. For those who tweet or post and then go back to having a brunch or selfies or whatever they may do, that's a luxury, and some white people still haven't realized that. And that's the end of the article. What are your guys' initial thoughts on this topic of performative outrage? Its productivity, its demand.
So performative outrage is essentially just another way of saying virtue signaling.
Right. Mm-hmm. And virtue signaling for.
I don't know which one I like better.
I like performative outrage.
Term.
I think I like performative outrage.
I think that's more descriptive than virtue signaling.
Yeah. So virtue signaling, for people that don't know, is you are public and out loud your life and your words say, I believe in this, or I'm about this, in order to be seen as
pious,
woke.
Yeah,
woke. Yeah. But what are your guys' thoughts on what's being said? What's your guys' involvement in it, or lack of involvement in it, so on and so forth?
So there's a lot of. I'd have to just go through and hit point
systematically.
after point.
I was trying to interrupt as I was going. Moral.
Yeah, there's really. there's a lot there to unpack.
Yeah, I agree.
Theologically, sociologically, I mean, there's just a lot to unpack.
I agree.
The last statement about being able to go back to your life or not being able to go back to your life, I think that's a really... Okay, so I understand that performance-wise, in other words, the life that you live, the life that you perform, I understand that performance-wise, there's truth to that statement, that there is a disparity there. But that disparity is... So basically, there's a disparity of equal outcome. I agree with that. But there's not a disparity of equal opportunity. And just the fact that you have Black Americans who can go to brunch...
I know, it was a weird jab and a hypocritical jab almost.
It bothers me from... Okay, so do you remember that old show, that old classic streaming on HBO right now? Feel free to give us money, HBO. Streaming on HBO Max. That old classic, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. That's on HBO, huh? Yeah, HBO Max, yeah.
Cool.
So in that show, there was the disparity that was constantly being represented between Will Smith, who came from West Philly, born and raised, and then Carlton, his cousin, who came from Wealth and lives in LA County, Bel Air. And so there was always
for those who are not familiar, Carlton's daddy is a Black attorney.
A Black judge, in fact.
Yeah. So he's done very well.
So, I mean, this conversation's been going on for a long time. Is the point I'm making? There is a painting with a very large brush that the Black community is by nature, by its ontology, by its essence, less than, and I don't believe that that is a necessary truth. Now, whether it is an actual truth demographically, perhaps, but is it a necessary truth? No, I don't think that it is a necessary truth. I think that in every culture, well, it's that American dream that people talk about. In every culture, there is the possibility, perhaps not probability, but there is the possibility for people to push past what is in front of them and to dominate it. That's what American culture is based on. And so, yes, I do believe in the idea that there is systemic racism, and I do believe that in America, in particular, it seems that it is pointed at the African American culture more than other cultures. That being said, I disagree with the idea that then fundamentally it is impossible or even completely unlikely that you can have an equality of outcomes. I don't know if I unpacked that very well, but some people are really outraged by this, but there's a conservative commentator, Candace Owens. Have you guys seen her thing?
Sure.
Yeah.
Her rant, and she makes a lot of points to that end. And I don't agree with everything she said, but I think that what she has to say is actually a really good point. So I think the brunch comment is really weird.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a weird jab, and it's
like
it's ironically just fueling the fire that they're trying to extinguish in a weird way.
Yeah, I don't know that they're trying to extinguish the fire. I think that article is written from a intersectional position.
Sure.
And wants to say that, you can't really understand, so stop trying to say that you understand, because doing so makes it worse.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You were saying, go ahead. He was saying something about Candace Owens, or maybe he was just posting the link if you want to get her point on it. But yeah, go ahead, Pastor Monty.
Well, again, complex issue, right? So I'm kind of in the same ballpark as Josh is in a lot of ways. We've talked about this before. when you're looking at the sociological issues that are involved here, it seems to me that people are quite selective in how they approach things. So, yes, I believe that there is racial inequality that exists inside of the United States, but I wish to point out from a larger perspective that regardless of the culture that you go into, and I've lived in several different cultures, both as a participant and as an observer, biases exist regardless of where you are in the world. And it doesn't matter whether you're on the African continent and you have tribal groups that are think that they're superior to the other tribal group.
Yeah, look at Rwanda.
Or whether you're in Asian culture, where the whole impetus for Japan extending itself was to show superiority over the Koreans, whether it's in Hawaii, where the Samoans are prejudiced against by other groups coming in. It doesn't matter where you are. So first of all, prejudice is a human condition to begin with, and one that generates out of sin and self. That being said, in American culture, I'm not exactly sure that the so-called prejudice that exists distinctly in regard to those who are black is necessarily accurate. We have aspects of it. We have statistics now. The Washington Post keeps statistics. The FBI keeps statistics, and statistically speaking, none of the narrative that blacks are treated worse than whites in regard to the police are not held up by the statistics.
Now, you mentioned that on Truth Time, and I asked you for...
The Washington Post just got done posting a comparison.
A link.
Is it cities with police brutality and who's running those cities? Is that what you're getting at?
Well, the types of murders that are committed in regard to black on white and white on white
gotcha.
and incidences. Washington Post just posts statistics, and the FBI has yearly statistics. So, my point is that first of all, the statistical data doesn't uphold the narrative that is out there. Second of all, I have no problem with having moral outrage over truly those things where it exists. So there's no question whatsoever that the actions of this police officer, were inappropriate and need to be dealt with. I would like to hear some moral outrage from Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all these groups in regard to the black retired chief of police that was simply trying to defend his store and was killed by a bunch of black looters.
Can you do me a favor and send me? I can't find those stats, but I'd like to post them if they're there. So can you send me?
I'll see if I can look them up and send them to you. So it was recently talked about in detail on Tucker Carlson, and one or two others were talking about it because they had just got done putting it out.
Right, I'm not really interested in the commentary. I'm interested in the actual stats that were put out.
Yeah, the actual statistic. That's fine. I'll look it up and see if I can find it. But my point is that there's lots of supposed outrage, that exists, but it's very discriminatory and only in one way, and so we have lots of false narrative that are out there.
Well,
and I wish to point out, from a cultural standpoint, that the blacks are vocal about how they feel about some of the things that they have going on inside of their culture. but I lived for several months in Atlanta several years ago, and I would listen to black forums talk about the fact that a cultural phenomenon that takes place often is that blacks or that individuals within cultures try to hold other individuals within those cultures down or hold them within a particular way they do things. And one of the things that the black leaders of Atlanta were talking about is that the black movement in Atlanta was holding back people from accomplishing what they wanted to. I would also say
that's been, I mean, that has been a topic of conversation for a long time. Like, look at, I know, like, he's been discredited, but not in terms of education. Bill Cosby, Bill Cosby, had been saying for, I don't know, 40 years or something that there was a picture that was being painted of the African American community that was, that it inhibited them, and he wanted to work against that. That's why he wanted like family friendly programming, educational programming, things like that didn't paint the black community as a bunch of thugs.
Exactly, and that phenomenon takes place across cultures as well. So, and we're only talking about one culture here, where we have a multitude of cultures. So the blacks always point out, the issues very vocally as to where they think they are. But what about the Hispanics? What about the Filipinos?
Okay, so when
what
you
about
so
American
when you,
Indians?
Okay, so when you say the blacks, you are referring to a specific subsect, a vocal minority of black people, right?
Actually, I'm referring specifically to a group of individuals who have identified themselves according to their skin color, who want to put out a false narrative.
What I'm saying is that there's no monolithic, entity called the blacks or the African Americans. I think that's one of the dangerous narratives that's put out. One of the dangerous narratives that's put out that needs to be worked against, that says that there is one monolithic identity. The truth is that their culture, just like any other ethnicity, is fractured
to your point,
in the way in which it operates. And so you have a vocal minority saying, no, this is how it is.
But actually, that's a self-identification, Josh, and they've worked very hard to make that self-identification. But if you want to lift up your point, if you go into looking at the actual origins of individuals that come out of Africa, actually, not a large portion of those that are black come out of an African heritage. You've got Ethiopia, you've got basically the African continent has several groups which are distinctive in how it is that they come into where we are today. So they've kind of painted their own picture.
Okay, I don't really sure. I mean, that's just like
all I'm saying is a lot of years.
That's just like saying.
I don't want to be harsh. Josh. But the reality of it is,
I don't think it's harsh. I think it's unfair.
Well, from a sociological perspective, basically, those in the black community which have worked hard to paint this false narrative have done so to the detriment of the community itself.
Which is going to be true. Which is going to be true of every community. There's going to be this vocal minority that wants to paint with a large brush and then inundates the culture through art and media, right?
LGBTQ.
Art, media, politics.
It's right now. It's black. Black.
Well, it has been that for a long time. But they're going to paint with a large brush, and then they're going to convince people They're going to convince people that that's how every person should feel. You're not truly black.
Ironically.
Unless you, right? You're not truly black unless you paint with that same brush. And that's going to cause people to feel guilty. And then they're going to question that. And that's what I was talking about when I was talking about the Fresh Prince, where you have, even back then in the 1980s, you have Carlton, feeling that he wasn't black enough. And there was this, actually, that was a constant conversation between Will and Uncle Phil about whether Uncle Phil was black enough. But I don't think that it's a worthwhile conversation in terms of where we need to go, right? I mean, the sociological standpoint is, you already justified that
it's everywhere.
So it's not hard to understand that it's systemic in nature. The degree in which it's systemic, okay, we don't know. I personally believe that there is a stigma that's associated with Black America that is worse, if you will, than the other ethnicities that are a part of America. I think that that's easy to prove. But that being said, the other point that you made, I think, is the more prescient point that people don't pay attention to, which is that what you're dealing with, and I discussed this on Nightlight on Thursday a little bit more, is a heart issue. You will never get past systemic oppression, no matter how good your institution is, no matter how good your culture is at weeding it out. Given enough time, the human heart will go that way. And racism is a performance issue. It's the performance of a hateful heart. Mm-hmm. So, and you were talking about that with prejudice. You were saying same thing, right? Racism.
Yeah,
so a person's identity isn't racist. That's how they perform their hateful heart. So the person's identity is wickedness. It's hatefulness. And what needs to happen as a solution to that cannot be done on a social level. It just can't be. It can't be done on a performance level. So things like protests, they're good, right? The reason why things like protests are good is because they address the performance of the government specifically, or a group of people, like a governing group of people. Those things are good. They address the performance of the government and alert the government to the idea that, hey, your system of management is not working correctly. That's good, but that will never undo the problem.
Yep.
So to think that going out there and
starting a fundraiser or an organization,
like those things, hey, they're good, more power to you, but they don't address the actual problem, which will always rear its head, because deep down the problem is a wickedness problem, and that can only be done transformatively. You can only have transformative change, or you can only use a transformative change on the heart to get rid of that problem. And the only thing that transforms is something that is transcendent. Another person can't transform another person because it's a human giving a human problems. It's blind leading the blind. So in order for there to be a transformation, it needs to be transcendent. You mean we can't
just uphold the moral code on our own?
Exactly. What does that
keep breaking the moral code.
What does that even mean?
Well,
that's what it is.
So then the issue comes from a biblical perspective.
Looks like James fact checked you. He got the Washington Post thing on.
He found it good. Okay.
Yeah.
So from a biblical perspective, the issue then becomes, how do those who claim to represent the gospel of Christ then address this issue so that Christ would be glorified and people would be led to a correct understanding? And what I would say is that those who have been most vocal, did either of you have an opportunity to listen to the funeral procession that was given in regard to George Floyd, and in particular?
I mean, I saw clips from it. I thought it was an odd spectacle because there were people who weren't associated with him talking, and the Reverend,
it was weird.
And the Reverend, quote unquote, Al Sharpton, did a couple things which I thought were interesting. Number one, he kept
My point exactly.
Name dropping people. It was like that's what the audience wanted people to know.
Yeah.
That, like, you know, Tiffany Haddish is in the building, you know, like it is weird. Like, it's
influencers,
like they want
Using
people to
them as
know, hey,
influencers.
these people are there, and that goes to the virtue signaling thing.
Yep.
But the thing that also
Right.
got me was at the end how he noted incorrectly, by the way, that Jesus, he wanted to pray in Jesus' name. Jesus, the black man who was killed by his government. Guys, Jesus wasn't black. He was olive-skinned. He was Hebrew. And by the way, Hebrews aren't black either. Look up anything on the Hebrew Israelites, which is the movement that Al Sharpton apparently is referencing, and you'll see that there's lots of issues with that mentality. No, Jesus.
Yeah,
was not a
my
black
point is that
and he wasn't killed, and he wasn't killed because he was inciting a rebellion against his government.
Yeah.
The Roman government
No.
allowed the Jewish people to kill him against their wishes, for the record, because the Jewish people, his own people, hated him because of the wickedness in their hearts. He wasn't trying to overthrow them. So, again, I don't know what Al Sharpton's doing, but it wasn't Christianity, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Well, if you listen to his speech,
Heidi calls it a performative eulogy.
Oh.
yeah,
Nice.
very much so, Heidi. His speech basically was inciting the whole issue of and upholding a false narrative in regard to where the black community is coming from. So and yet he claims to represent Christ.
Does he these days? I don't know.
Well,
I don't think he does personally, but
okay. So here's my point. Let me close with my ideas with this thought. I have no problem with moral outrage in regard to racism. I don't tolerate racism, and I know all about dealing with race in my family. So I don't tolerate that, but I clearly see it as a sin issue and the condition of man. And as you said, Josh, I agree 100%. The only way to address that is the denial of self and coming to Christ and allowing Him to give us guidance as to who we are and how we are valued as His creation, rather than using identity in order to find our value.
Identity politics, yeah.
Now, if you are morally, and so here's the integrity of it aspect is, listen, if you're morally outraged over something, and you claim to come from whatever perspective on your moral outrage, have some intellectual honesty and be morally outraged equally about all of those things which are happening. So be outraged that a man had lost his life because of that disparity. In like manner, be outraged by those that are looting and stealing and destroying small businesses within their own communities, and killing black on black murder that is not even talked about because of these things that are happening. And the reality is, what we see happening today, it is not being presented that way.
Yeah, even in like this conversation, you lose a big audience because you can't hold you can't hold a position that is understanding of all the different angles, right? It's you're either this, as Anakin Skywalker says, you're either with me or you're my enemy or something, So by purporting the or by, you know, suggesting the statistics and the facts, and it's not even that you're going against the narrative, it's that you want to tell the bigger narrative, you know, the full narrative, if you will. You're already seen as racist. You're being racist by the fact that you're not submitting to the voice and the noise.
So let me just, I want to give some context for Pastor Monty, because he speaks passionately, and people...
he's married to a Filipino woman.
That's what I was going to say. People may write him off when he says, I understand racism in my family, but, you know, he is in an interracial marriage. And my mother is dark enough, she might not like this statement, but... you know, but she's dark enough that she can pass as African American.
It has happened.
Yeah. So, and, you know, and I've heard many stories and even experienced it. You know, anyway, but those are all personal experiences. But the point is that he has some context for talking about that with his sociological background and so on and so forth. That being said, I want to reiterate this again, and I went into detail a lot more on Nightlight about this. But, so you can go back and watch it if you want to. But the issue of racism can only be dealt with when we understand that racism is a performance of a heart issue. And that the heart of mankind is wicked, and it doesn't matter where it's going to work itself out. If you don't address the heart, you can get rid of all the racism in the world, and the wickedness will still grow into something else. And that's what you have. When Pastor Monty speaks of injustice across the board, and he says, well, what about the looting and all of this stuff? It's because maybe those people, okay, and I want to be clear about that because I don't think it's true, but maybe those people, giving them the benefit of the doubt, aren't racist also, but they are wicked. They have wicked hearts, and that shows itself when they exploit that moment for selfish ambition and for envy and violence and all of these things that are not godly. Nobody is immune. So the only thing that we can do to really change things is by going back to a God who transforms, stepping outside of the human condition, stepping outside of of identifying us by us. We are wicked. If we identify us by us, then we're always going to identify us by something that's corrupt. And maybe it works for a time being, but eventually it degrades, and we do terrible things to each other. That's what that classic book, William Golding's Lord of the Flies, is about. Last night we watched The Purge. Seemed pretty prescient in this day and age, you know? And we watched The Purge, and that was a huge theme of The Purge, is people essentially worshiping themselves as gods. That's what happens. And when they do that, they don't create little paradises. Mm-hmm. They destroy and demolish and dehumanize other people. So you can get rid of racism all you want to, but what's going to come in its place is not going to be good. What needs to happen is, instead of dealing with the performative issue, you deal with the heart issue. Mm-hmm. And how does that happen? How does that change happen? It happens at a grassroots level in the communities, with people spreading the word of God and treating each other tenderheartedly on the basis of them being image bearers of God. Teaching that to children and letting that happen. Because quite honestly, the institutions are already gone. You can't, but if you're teaching your children to see other people as made in the image of God, to not see past color, but to celebrate color as being a facet about how God created people, and letting that describe but not be the identity. The identity is the image of God, but then there's these descriptions that make people unique and interesting and wonderful. But having everybody come together under the umbrella of being made in the image of God, and then having the prescription for their actions be based on the example of Jesus Christ, all of those things, then you can actually see change that matters. And for all the protests that you do in the world, and all the money that you donate, and all the black squares that you put on a random Tuesday on your social media feeds, nothing, all of those things together will not nearly be as powerful as taking on another person, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their descriptors, as if they are made in the image of God. If you were to take one person in your life and adopt them into your life as if they were made in the image of God, talk to them about God, all of those things, that life would be affected in such a profound way that would be so far beyond all of your protests and all of your, your black squares and your virtue signaling combined.
It's spiderwebs.
And that is done in the home.
Yeah.
That's done in a very small grassroots level without loud voices and so on and so forth. So, if there is something that you can affect, if there is a change on a performance level that you can affect, hey, do it. Write letters, protest, demonstrate, all that sort of stuff. Do sit-ins, all of that sort of stuff, as long as you're doing it within the realm of the way that Christ would do it, And so, that's the difference between, for instance, MLK and Malcolm X, right? There is a right way to go about that. And because we live in America, a country that allows us the freedom to do so, more power to us. That's great. Do that. Don't deny Christ in that process. But don't think for a second that that is what is going to affect real change. And pastorally speaking, that's where the conversation needs to be. Real change needs to happen, and we need to problem solve these issues. And there are ethnicities with I believe the African Americans feeling the most of it, that are really going through systemic oppression and hatred within our country. And those people pastorally need to be ministered to as an errand of mercy. That's what we're supposed to be doing, just like we've done all throughout the centuries in all areas, not just in ethnicity, but, starting hospitals and starting orphanages and starting things for like widows and stuff like that. Like the scripture says that is where real ministry lies, taking care of those who are being oppressed or who are being forgotten. That's where we're supposed to do ministry. So let's not forget that pastorally we need to be there, and it's not enough to just say, hey, you're not supposed to act like that. The scripture says you're not supposed to act like that. But also, on the flip side of it, let's not forget to say, hey, the scripture says you're not supposed to act like that. and then to do that in the home, and to do that with simple, essential relationships where we do that on a small level, and to not try to make it about these grandiose virtue signaling
just yesterday,
performative outrages.
Yeah, just last night, as we were going to tucking him in for bed, we were talking with my son and having this conversation exactly like you're saying, and asking him if he knows what's going on, informing him on a level he can understand what's going on.
Right.
You're not going to the exhaustive
he's
details.
4, right?
He's almost 5. Yeah, he's almost 5. But yeah, it's just interesting to see his processing and stuff. And we're talking about racism and giving him the general idea of what that means. And his response to that when explaining it to him is like, well, it's like confusion. Like he literally was like, we explained racism to him and how people act and how people treat other people because of skin color or whatever, and his response is a very confused what? Because he doesn't see that. That's not part of his life. He goes to a church where this person is married to this ethnicity and so on and so forth, and it's a multicultural church, and he sees how fairly people are treated and how equally people are treated because of an actual reason, not because of, moral code, which is whatever. But this is interesting. It's interesting. So you're speaking at a grassroots level, and
let me just clarify one point before we close.
Yeah.
And which kind of reinforces Josh's point, but there is a false narrative which is out there that basically says that we have systemic racism, particularly directed towards the blacks. And I wish to point out from a historical and cultural perspective that there is no systemic racism. Systemic means that it's built into the institutions and has not been addressed and directed towards a particular culture. And if you historically look at what has taken place all the way from the 1950s and up to current, you will find that the government, whether it be state, local, or federal, the government has worked very hard to put into place mechanisms to do away with systemic racism. However, the point is that regardless of whether you can do away with the systemic racism and it's not built into the system, you still have individuals who administer programs that have personal race issues that they deal with, and so it comes back to the issue of individual hearts.
Yeah, and the issue of using large brushstrokes to paint a narrative.
Don't you feel that conversation is, more destructive than good? I mean, I know you're coming at it from more of like a teaching perspective, but like the truth is that it is systemic.
It's a false narrative that is presented out there, and I don't know. Allow me to finish my statement. It's a false narrative which is presented out there by groups like Black Lives Matter, and I have spent the bulk of the last several days listening to black academics who make my point exactly.
Yeah, I don't.
That there have been laws put into place, and it is not systemic that is causing the issue. There is no systematic attempt to try to do in blacks. There's not.
Okay.
And my issue is...
No, hold on.
My issue is I do not like false narratives to stand.
All right. So, listen. It's not a false narrative. It's a way of looking at it. And there is a difference between a false narrative and I don't know how you would say it, like a less than fully descriptive way of viewing it. It's always important that we pay attention to language. It is always important that we pay attention to language. But if, as a Christian, you're looking at it from a Christian perspective and you can understand that from a Christian perspective, because it's a heart issue, the issue of prejudice, the issue of essentially bitterness, selfish ambition, envy, those things will always seep into any human institution and target those people who appear weaker, right? Then you can admit that from a Christian perspective, it is systemic. Now, if what you're saying is that the laws don't have anything in them that are systemic and that we've constantly worked against that, yeah, of course. In America, we're really actually pretty good about that. We're really actually progressive. But to me, it argues against the heart issue to say.
Well, I'm just clarifying, Josh, that, and you reinforced my point, that when these people, the narrative that is being put out by Black Lives Matters and others is that it is built into our governmental systems to oppress people, that is a false narrative.
Yeah, but that's also... I
don't disagree with the fact that there are clearly people in power for the wrong reasons. There are clearly people in power that get there and want to oppress others, but that is a heart issue that is not systemic in the governmental agency that exists and administrates the laws.
Well, no, it is systemic. It's just not. It's not perhaps in the rules. But it is systemic. It is systemic in the agency. There's a reason why they have to. There's a reason why the agency the institutions are living, right? They're living. They can constantly be interpreted because you can't trust. You basically have to constantly reinvent them because there's always new ways of being wicked.
Mm.
It is.
Well, I'm just saying,
systemic, and I And I think
Determined being hijacked
I think you've made
incorrectly.
I think you've made your position amply clear. Let me make my position clear.
More than clear.
That's what I mean by amply. So let me make my position clear. It is systemic, and I think that it is a dangerous. When I say dangerous, what I mean is it's like unkind. It's no, that's not helpful. It's unuseful. It's not useful. It's
Looking
not
at it from an academic standpoint, Josh, and I'm in a position to do so. I am an academic.
Again, you've made your position clear. Let me make my position clear.
Then don't dismiss my position or say that I'm incorrect, because I'm not. You may be presenting a different point of view, and I appreciate your different point of view, but do not dismiss me.
If I wanted to dismiss you, I would just shut your feet off.
You're welcome to do that.
I am, but I'm not. I am, but I'm not doing that. So I'm not dismissing you. Now let me make my point.
You would be in a position of power and abusing it.
Let me make my point and stop cutting me off.
Do not dismiss me, Josh.
I'm not dismissing you. Disagreeing with you is not dismissing you. And I haven't even fully disagreed with you. I stated that it was a perspective issue.
That needs to be made apparent that it is a perspective issue, and your perspective is just as important as my perspective.
No, that's not what I'm saying. We're not being subjective here. Let your perspective stand. Let your perspective stand on what you said. That's fine. What you said is what you said. Let it speak for itself. I don't need to say that your position is better than mine or less than mine, but I can disagree with what you're saying, and I'm going to say what I need to say. Now, are you going to be respectful of the conversation and give me permission to speak? Or are you going to keep cutting me?
Go ahead and speak, but don't say, after I just said that the academics of it, the history of it, shows that the nature of which these people are using the term is a false narrative, and that is accurate.
It is not accurate that it is not a systemic issue. It is accurate that it is not in the rules. You're looking at it from a very specific perspective and therefore trying to relegate it to saying that it is not a systemic issue, or that that it's not a systemic issue. That's not true. It is only true from one perspective, and mind you, not from the Christian perspective. And that's what we're looking at here. So I've already stated that multiple times. I'm sorry if you don't like the way that I'm phrasing it. I can try to keep rephrasing it so it doesn't offend you. I can try to virtue signal that way. But the truth is that specifically, it is a systemic issue. It comes out of the wickedness of people's hearts. It is, because it is a wickedness of the heart issue, it is always going to work itself out in any government, in any system that you have. And as you stated much earlier in the broadcast, you can see that across cultures, no matter what. So it is a systemic issue. And if we choose to fight that battle, if we choose to fight about specifically allowing people to redirect language, right, and go there and create that story, then what we're doing is we are fighting battles instead of wars. And that's why I'm saying it's not useful for the discussion to argue from an academic standpoint when we're not arguing from an academic standpoint. We're arguing from a biblical standpoint. So to me, let them have that. Yeah, it is systemic. And yeah, it is oppression. And yeah, it's always going to be there. And if you want change to happen, then you have to deal with it at a grassroots level where transformation can really take place, which is in the heart. If we sit there and we argue about whether, this person said that and whether that's the accurate way of saying this and so on and so forth, and people need to use this type of wording in order to have any sort of ability to explain or understand anything, then aren't we essentially doing the same thing? Yeah. Aren't we essentially creating sort of a Gnostic stronghold of information? The truth is that pastorally, these people, and yes, I'm talking about black people, but also minorities, like other minorities, these people are experiencing real trauma. And that real trauma has to be addressed. And if we sit there and we constantly argue about whether they have a right to call it trauma or so on and so forth, or because maybe they are experiencing real trauma, but they're not talking about it correctly, then how are we doing them any favors in terms of pastorally? In other words, a better way of saying that would be, how are we doing right by God when we are ministering to them to say, well, you can talk about it, but you can only talk about it this way, and if you don't talk about it this way, then you're wrong, and we're not going to address it.
Yeah.
Pastorally, that just doesn't work.
Okay, my only response to you, Josh, would be this. That my issue is simply this. That those who are putting forth their narrative want to hijack the use of words and to make those words invalid because they're simply not aligned with the truth. So, for example, when I pointed out that they make this statement, but the statistical data doesn't show the statement to be true, then that invalidates what it is that they're trying to say from the standpoint of hijacking the truth. If I'm going to talk to somebody on 101, I've already said this is a sin issue, and that I don't agree with. But when there is information present to show that whatever narrative they're presenting, if it doesn't match up or align with the truth, then their position has already been invalidated, whether they want to hear that or not.
Why does that matter?
Well, it matters from the standpoint that that narrative is being put out. Well, no. You asked the question, I'm going to answer.
No. Let me explain the question. Let me explain the question. When I say why does that matter, you see an idiot on the side of the road, and the idiot is bleeding out, and they're making dumb statements. Does that mean that you don't go bandage their wounds and not listen to what they're saying?
How do I assume that? Why would I assume that they're an idiot until I got down next to them and found out what their real issue is? But maybe they have low blood sugar. Maybe they're becoming, they can't communicate because of their...
I already said they're bleeding out on the side of the road. You know what their issue is.
But you prefaced it with saying they're an idiot, and I wouldn't make that determination.
That is what you're saying. You're saying that...
That is not what I'm saying.
You're saying
No, you're hijacking. Well, no, Josh. No, that's not... No. Let me make myself clear that this narrative is being put out for the whole world to digest. And it is a false narrative not backed up by the facts.
You're saying that these people are not speaking correctly, and therefore we shouldn't pay them attention. Or we should argue with them.
I'm saying they are presenting untruth, and we stand for truth.
Yeah, and I'm asking what you do in the situation when they're presenting untruth. And you're saying that we argue with them about the truth. And I'm saying, look, they're bleeding out. So let them say whatever they're going to say while you fix them up.
Not that simple, Josh.
Pastorally, I think it is. Once you've shown the goodwill of fixing the person on the side of the road who's bleeding out, regardless of what they're saying, that will open many, many doors to dealing with the truth and teaching them. When we bring people to Christ, we don't ask them to have correct theology besides just a very few points, which is basically, I need your help, God, and I'm willing to let you give it to me. Besides that, we don't ask them to talk about the relationship between the Father and the Son and the hypostatic union. We don't need people to be so specific and to get everything right. It's called grace. You know that. And it applies here.
We're not talking about bringing somebody to Christ. We're talking about
We're always talking about bringing people to Christ. And when we talk about this being a heart issue...
You're hijacking what I'm saying.
Well, no, I'm keeping it where it's supposed to be. When we're talking about a heart issue, When we're talking about a heart issue and how it's supposed to be transformative, what are we talking about if not the gospel message and bringing people to Christ?
If I'm talking to somebody with the desire to bring them to an understanding of truth and to bring them to Christ, that's the direction I'm going to go, because as I stated way earlier in this conversation, it is a heart issue.
So then why aren't you focusing on that?
But these people are going to confront me because I'm white, and they're going to tell me I have no intersectionality.
Then you're going to turn the other cheek.
And that I have to get on my knees and bow down to their power because they live in their false narrative. And I simply will not do that.
But that has nothing.
And that's fine. Exactly what they've been doing to people.
So fine, don't bow down. But are you going to bandage? Are you going to bandage their wounds?
Sure.
Okay. And how do we do that? By presenting the gospel and by not getting into arguments with them about things that we already know are false that will resolve themselves once they come to a gospel understanding. And I think that
before you can bandage their wounds, Josh, you have to clean them, and a good healthy dose of alcohol directly on the wound will clean out all of that yuck before it can be bandaged and healed.
Before you do surgery. But when a person's that's not true.
No,
when a person's bleeding out, no, it's not. When a person's bleeding out, you have to stop the bleeding first. Then you can clean the wound.
But you have to see where they're bleeding from.
Yeah, but you don't have to clean the wound first. And again, I think you're arguing semantics with me instead of arguing for the actual thing that we're both trying to accomplish here.
I have no problem, Josh, with, as you said, doing some type of triage. The issue has to do is whether that person is even going to want triage.
Why does that matter?
Well, it does matter because there are some people that simply won't allow you to do triage.
Okay, but God's grace, the way that we outwork God's grace in ministry, and it works with the human condition, right? So people may hate you for it, but they're still going to. I experience this in counseling all the time, where I say, here's the rules for counseling, for instance. I say, this is how it's going to be. We're going to go down this road, and if you don't like it, then deal with it. I'm fine with it. Like, we don't have to do counseling. And they inevitably do counseling anyway. Why? Because people want to be better. It's what it comes down to. And so if you're offering them grace in very rare, very few exceptions, because they are so hurt, if what you're offering them is authentic help, then generally they'll take it. Even if they're angry, even if they're muttering, hateful things at you because you're cleaning the wound, as you put it, or because you're stopping the bleeding, as I'm talking about, whatever it is, they'll take it. So we can't worry about that. We just can't worry about that. But when we come into a situation where systemic oppression due to the wickedness of man is performing as racism or performing as, even just straight up like police brutality or whatever, when we're coming into a situation like that, what we have to pay attention to is that bleeding. We have to pay attention to that bleeding, and the transformative work of Christ is the tool by which we do that. It's not arguing with them about the about the accuracy of the words used in critical race theory. It's let them have their words. We have to have the logos, the idea behind the words. The problem is that when we allow the ideas behind the words to be taken, that's the problem. And so, that's where you can get sort of that Orwellian, words control the society. But if we have the idea behind the words, then let them have their words.
Well, I would say, Josh, that you're talking about approaching the situation from clearly different standpoints to bring about the same effect. No. And there's a place for what you're saying in an emergency. There's also a place for what I'm saying.
Sure. I think that when the situation isn't as it is, I agree with you. When we're in a safe situation where people aren't bleeding out, and you have the time to that bleeding out has been tourniqueted. You're in a hospital. You're talking about what your next moves are. People can sit down and problem solve. Because the person's life isn't on the line. That's absolutely true. So an academic setting, that makes total sense. But the nation is definitely in a triage moment, like with what they're doing, man, tensions are high. People are dying. People are being hurt. People don't know what's happening. They're freaking out. And what we need is not academia. What we need is real transformation. And that's going to come from real grassroots, on the ground love of Christ being shown. Once we get safe, then we can deal with academia. Then we can start teaching things like hypostatic union. All right.
I don't know if there's.
We have a lot of comments,
and
I'll read you some comments.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So Heidi says it's systemic when the governmental system is putting humans into the decision-making places, so everything would be out of a wicked heart. It will always turn ugly. James says people are using the term systemic to relegate and mitigate any personal responsibility. People speaking to the systems that are put in place. Mm-hmm. Lucy Brown says it's an individual issue that a person on his own that he cannot win. The results that we see happening, chaos, lawlessness, greed, and personal demands, culture, need to be stopped. Sometimes consequences of actions and misguided thinking needs to bear itself out. We can show God's grace, but unfortunately we can't save everyone. Yeah, I think on all three of those statements, I think we all agree. I think we all agree with all of those statements. And the real issue here is how do we work that out? And I can tell you, from Pastor Monty paints himself as an academic, and he's got degrees to prove that. I definitely have a philosophical mind. I'm a pastor, and that's my thought process. Is I've got real people out there who are really suffering, so I'm going to come at it from a pastoral perspective. I think, I don't know, where are you at, Adam?
I mean, in terms of like the primary approach to it, is your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely, obviously I agree with where you're both coming from and the usefulness of where you're both coming from. I think given my position as well, I think my primary approach has to be yours to start, and then presenting the truth and information, like what Pastor Monty is saying. I don't think one contradicts the other. I think it's just a prioritization, and so I think that my primary response has to be pastor first. Otherwise, I don't know if I'm doing right by my calling in position.
The other thing to consider, as far as I'm concerned, is that I also come from a law enforcement background.
Mm-hmm. So there is that to consider too. Yeah, in all things, I think that what the Apostle Paul talks about being useful for each other is really what it comes down to. So you're going to answer, everybody's going to answer to God for whether they were useful, for whether they were, tender-hearted toward the other person. And I think that's, useful sometimes means abrasive. Let's be honest. If you got a lot of grossness on you and you need to be cleaned, sometimes that means you're going to take that wool, the steel wool, and scrub it down,
Yeah.
Sometimes it means you got to be gentle if you're dealing with an eggshell. Whatever is useful is what needs to happen. So we pray for God's discernment on all of our people, anybody listening or whatever, because these are hard times.
Mm-hmm.
That agreed.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for everyone that tuned in. Thank you to you guys, and
Do we still have people left?
I'm not sure. I'm
Yeah, we
not
do.
looking. But yeah, I be praying for the times we're in and how we can do right by our mission. in
Well,
that.
and also, I know you're trying to close out, but I just want to, say, like, pray for us, guys. Like you people who are out there listening, like, look, we're not claiming to have all the answers.
Yeah.
We're trying to problem solve a
Yeah.
very complex issue. And, if you, give us grace. Forgive us if
It's a hard thing these days.
if
but
we don't know exactly how to speak on it, because it is difficult. So give us grace, because we understand that it's our responsibility to speak on it, and we're trying the best we can. So please pray for us, and don't hate us for trying.
Yeah. Okay, tune in next week, same time, same channel. Bye-bye.
The views presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of the S3EP Bible Fellowship.